Gladiator 2 is directed by Ridley Scott, and this is the sequel to the first film, Gladiator, which came out over 20 years ago. I'm going to talk about the first film first. I like that movie. I think it's really good. I think I have it at like a high 8 out of 10, but I don't love the movie like a lot of people do. I don't think it's a masterpiece. The first time I watched Gladiator, my biggest complaint that the movie was too long. That was with the theatrical cut. And then I saw the director's cut, and then that criticism just was a little bit more amplified. But Gladiator 2 is shorter than both cuts of Gladiator. So I was like, okay, let's see if this is either gonna still feel too long or if it's maybe not gonna be long enough this time. And because I'm curious to see how, all these years later, how Scott would approach it. And for the first act, I was terrified because I was watching the first act of this movie going, oh my god, everything is the same so far. And I just really thought we were just going to get the first Gladiator, but again, 20 years later in the same universe, but just repeat. And maybe there was just going to be some lazy excuse of like, well, history repeats itself. Thank God this movie didn't do that for the last two acts because it had this setup that we're like, we know, but then it took its supporting characters and then took it a completely different direction. And my biggest complaint with this movie isn't Paul Mescal. I want to get that right out of the way. I don't think he's the issue. I think it's his character and how he's written. In all honesty, he was the least intriguing character in almost the entire movie just because his character is almost kind of the same as the last Gladiator. He has something to avenge and he's hungry to, let that vengeance out. I really found that the supporting characters is what made this movie for me. Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal. In fact, looking back, I would have maybe made Pedro Pascal the lead of this movie. I know that's a risk because, then it's taking away from I guess what Ridley Scott thinks is the Gladiator formula because he's that mean general that, you want to see killed in the battlefield. At the same time, he was just a far more interesting character, particularly once you see it in the movie. I will say, what I found, the thing that actually impressed me most about this movie is how much is hidden in the trailers. There's so many little character dynamics, and the way the story plays out is not at all the way that you expect in the last 2/3. And so, like I said, this first act, I'm just going like, okay, what are we doing here? We've done this before. But then the last two acts, I was going like, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see this coming. Oh my god, that's really cool. And the politics of this era is so fascinating in the way that we are delved into it, to the point where almost I was a little disengaged when we cut back to Paul Mescal. Like, you care about him, the emotion is there, but I was more intrigued by whatever was going on with Denzel Washington. And Denzel Washington kind of did that Robert Downey Jr. thing with me with this movie, because when Oppenheimer came out last year and everyone's talking about Robert Downey Jr., oh my god, the Oscar, and I watched the first two acts of Oppenheimer going like, yeah, he's good, but why Oscar? And then the same thing kind of happened but with Denzel Washington in this movie. I wouldn't say necessarily the last act, I would say rather the last two acts, because like after the first act, the movie kind of completely, I feel like it's almost like Ridley Scott realized that he was kind of doing the first movie again and said, okay, let me make a few changes. I'm so glad that he did that. I just wish that kind of also applied to the first act. Not that the setup is bad, the setup's fine for what the story is, it's just you can kind of see where it's going. Like, I'm not even kidding, even within seconds of like one character being shown, I was like, instantly, they're gonna die. This was in the first act. I was like, they're dead, because I just felt the formula just kind of taking shape, and it made me really concerned for the rest of the movie, which made me so happy when the last part of the movie just did its own thing. I was like, thank god, it was a breath of fresh air. Let's talk about the action. The action's fun. I had a lot of fun with it. I would say like the attempts at spectacle are fun, but they're never like amazing for me. Like, you laugh when they're in boats in the Coliseum. It's fun. It has cool action. It's gory. You cringe a few times, but really the best action sequences in this movie are truly when it's just simply one-on-one, truly gritty. You're tense. You don't know what is gonna happen, and the emotional stakes are high. Particularly, you see it in the trailer. At one point, Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal, my god, what a combination of names there, are dueling it out. That's a very good one. There's one that it's not really in the trailer, but it's towards the beginning that Joseph Quinn character is overseeing towards the beginning of the movie. That's one of the best ones. There's so many really good hand-to-hand combat ones. There's one towards the end. I can't get into the details because spoilers. All really good one-on-one duels that were just really fantastic. Another thing I want to talk about that came to mind was Joseph Quinn. I like what he was doing with this movie. I just don't think he had enough screen time, and the shadow that Joaquin Phoenix looms over the kind of overly glamorized jerk on this franchise has. It just like it's impossible to beat. Joaquin Phoenix was so good in the first Gladiator. There was no way Joseph Quinn was gonna ever top that. The unfortunate thing about his performance is that it does kind of feel like he is. Now, he's not bad in the movie. He's really good. It just feels like he's trying to live up to this character that is so bratty and menacing. He just can't live up to it just because of how talented Joaquin Phoenix is. When it comes to comparing it to the first movie, there's things about the first movie that were better. I think the spectacle was done better. I thought the first movie was better shot. Also, one thing that didn't quite work with me in this movie is this digital aspect to it. And yeah, obviously the first movie shot on film and it looks grainy and it looks, not old, but it looks like it's part of its time. I don't know if it was the shutter speed or if it was the frames per second. There's a lot of moments in this movie where everything looks so motiony. It doesn't feel like I don't think it was transfer. It must have been shutter speed. Maybe they forgot their ND filter. I don't know. It just everything looks so like not film like. It felt very modern and techy with the way that things moved sometimes, particularly in the action sequences. And that's fine and all if you want to do that. It just doesn't work for a movie for me that takes place in the past, because that could work for a movie like John Wick. John Wick does that all the time. I'm pretty sure it's just shutter speed now that I'm thinking about it. That works because it's modern, takes place in modern day, and it's a lot of techo neo lights. Those can work. But when you're in this Gladiator past, it doesn't work for me just because it feels too modern and I associate it with like modern technology updates. I would have much preferred this movie was not shot to make everything look like it was in motion, or maybe even shot on film, because it just gives it that more you're in this time look versus giving this weird 2024 coding to it, is what that movie did. And that was like my biggest technical complaint. I thought sometimes the cinematography could have been a little bit more like symmetrical. I think personally I like when scale goes for symmetry. I think Denis Villeneuve is an amazing example of that. He always goes for, not that does it just look pretty, but is it framed well. That's something I would have liked to see a little bit more of, some symmetry in the scale, a little bit more, less trying to be modern. But besides that, I had a great time with this movie. The last two acts made the movie for me. Thank God the first act went by because I was really concerned. Like I said, not that it was bad. I was just kind of like, oh no, please don't be the first movie again. I was kind of like freaking out. But thank God the movie did its own thing. Like I said, I know I'm repeating myself. Comparing it to the first movie, I think the first movie's better. I think it's going to age better. I think the action for the time is more impressive than the action done in this movie for 2024. Russell Crowe was just a little bit more better as a lead in this concept than Paul Mescal. Not that he was miscast, but it felt like Russell Crowe is a better fit. But besides that, they're personally, I get the same enjoyment out of both movies. I don't think you can go wrong with either Gladiator movie. Anyways, I'm going to give Gladiator 2 an 8 out of 10. I will be watching Wicked on Monday. If you want me to review that, I will do that. As at least a few people comment. I don't know if I'm going to review it if like nobody demands it to me, because unless if I love the movie. If I absolutely love Wicked, I want to review it because hopefully I'm one of those people that goes in that a lot of people are right now going, I was skeptical but I loved it. So hopefully that's me on Monday. So yeah. Anyways, comment down below what you guys thought of Gladiator 2. How would you compare the two Gladiator films? Do you think the first one's a masterpiece, or do you think it's a little overrated like I do? Let me know, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that. And adios.